My name is Joe Peroni, and this is the Rise Above Project. And today I want to do a social experiment. Last week I did an analysis on an Alpha M video, and I had mentioned in there that when you actually do a video to help men these days, which part of that means is that they have to take responsibility for their actions and behaviors to do better. What happens is, or at least what's happened to me over the years, is that the more you do that and expect more from men instead of blaming other people, the more subscribers you lose. And it's interesting because I lost another bunch of subscribers. So I want to try this again to see if this works. Because a lot of these men who are actually putting stuff out there saying that they're helping men, but they're really not, what happens is that they build up these really good followings. And we see this in politics right now. In other words, it's no secret that one of the reasons why Donald Trump won is because a lot of young men like him. And as you see with Donald Trump, he never takes responsibility for anything, and he's always blaming other people, and he's bad-mouthing other people. And a lot of young men somehow think that that's masculine, and it's not. So I want to go over this Alpha M video again, but in a different way. What I'm going to do is I want to go down some of these comments that people make, of the ones that are actually more popular. Because when I read them, I can't even imagine why they're popular because they don't make any sense. And they wouldn't make sense to anyone who's actually trying to improve masculinity in any appreciable way. So let's look at the first comment here. It says, from the words of the legendary Chris Rock, of course, a comedian. So now we're taking our psychology advice from a comedian, but that's another story. He says, women, children, and dogs are loved unconditionally. Men are loved under the conditions that they provide something. Now, again, we can talk about who makes this rule. I mean, while it's true that most women want a guy to come to the table with some resources, but doesn't everybody? I mean, why would you want to be in a relationship with somebody who doesn't add to your life? So why are we only saying that this is a bad thing, that only men have to be providers? It's this thought that women don't have to come into a relationship with anything. I mean, I guarantee you women will tell you that there's a lot of responsibility on them in the relationship. Especially now because women are working even more than men are. Let's just, for argument's sake, let's say it's 50-50. So if men and women are both working 50-50, who do you think does most of the chores? That's typically the woman. So if you talk to a woman about this, they would say that they're the ones who are actually providing more than the men. Interesting thing here is that more women than men end the relationship. More of them are filing for divorce than men. And when you ask them why this is, a lot of times it's because they'll say the man is only providing in terms of work, whereas the woman is providing in terms of work and they're providing in other areas as well. And a man will complain and say, well, I provide, I do things, I work. But that's where part of the problem is because we live in a time where women are also working. So it's not enough for a man just to say, I work, and then not to be emotionally available for their partner or for their kids. There's going to be more that's expected. I mean, sure, if this was 1950s, a man can work, come home, and expect their wife to have dinner on the table, and their kids are going to be, dressed up or something like that, and the house is going to be totally clean. Right? And the man didn't have to do anything around the house, or not too much anyway. But it's a different world because women are working. So you can't just say, well, I have a job, so therefore I'm good enough, I'm providing. Again, it's like, it's the man who's saying that. Like, I provide. Well, right. But if that's all you're doing, it's probably not enough. And let's be honest about this. If we're talking about between men, between like, say, 35 and under, about 25% of them don't have jobs. Most of them are still living at home. When we look at women from 35 and under, 2/3 of them are in relationships where only 1/3 of men are in relationships. Well, how is that possible? It's because there's so many men that are still living at home that refuse to get a job, that refuse to get an education, that they're staying at home. They live it, well, not their home, they live at their parents' home. So these women are forced to be in relationships with men that are older than them in a completely different generation. So again, this first comment, of course, has a huge amount of likes, but it makes no sense if you want to be a quote unquote masculine man. And if you're watching a video like that's called alpha male, you would think you would want help in being an actual productive man in our society. Let's continue with these comments. It says, in general, society doesn't care about things negatively impacting men until it starts affecting women too. Again, we're trying to be poetic here, but it doesn't make any sense. Yes, people care about things that impact men. That's true. Unfortunately, a lot of times men, again, they do this thing where they don't go to doctors, they don't care, they don't talk about things that bother them in a meaningful way. And yes, it does affect the women around them. It affects their girlfriends, their wives, their mothers, their sisters, whoever. And they're the ones who end up trying to get the men the help that they need. So again, we're not looking at this in a correct way. Next comment with another huge amount of likes and replies. This man says, or this boy says, not to mention hearing women destroy guys for their height on a daily basis, which we can't do anything about. But as soon as anyone says anything about weight, which you can change, it's frowned upon for some reason. Okay, again, we're not talking apples to apples here. This is apples to oranges. It says, not to mention hearing women destroy guys for their height on a daily basis. Okay. I don't know why guys these days are so concerned about their height. Yes, it's true that women tend to prefer guys who are taller. However, your average girl is only like 5'2" or 5'3". So how tall do you need to be taller than a woman? You don't have to be that tall. And just for the record, I'm 5'6". I don't remember any days of my life feeling short. I don't remember anybody even mentioning that I was short. I played sports where without weight classes, right? It could be in football. Never thought I was short. It never concerned me. The fact that so many of these young boys or men are so hyper-focused if they're the right height or not is just, it screams insecurity. And when you walk around insecure, everybody knows it and everybody feels that you're insecure. That's what the problem is. It's not the height. I mean, go to Hollywood if you want. All these leading men. You can take a look at Tom Cruise. What is he, 5'5"? Robert De Niro, 5'5", 5'6". Al Pacino, 5'5", 5'6", somewhere around there. I mean, come on. Most of the leading men in Hollywood throughout all of these years that are considered to be like A-list people, Hollywood stars, how many of them are over 6 feet tall? I mean, I got news for you too. Arnold Schwarzenegger, they keep saying he's 6'2". He's not close to 6'2". He's a lot closer to 5'11". Considered to be tall for a bodybuilder, but not really that tall. And if you want to look at all the Mr. Olympias, the greatest bodybuilders who ever lived, there's very few of them that are even close to 6 feet tall. Your average world-class bodybuilder is somewhere between 5'6" to 5'9". And so again, why are you complaining? It's because you have all of your friends that have never accomplished anything all on this social media, and you get to sit there in that cesspool of negativity because you're not actually going out there and trying to do something with your life. And that's part of being a man, is to take action on things. So stop worrying about your height. And yeah, you can complain about a girl's weight, but that doesn't make you a man by making fun of people. And by the way, this day and age, you know, men tend to be more overweight than women are, and yet men have the ability to be leaner than women do, just based on hormonal levels. Let's see, what else? Somebody says, this is such an important and overly ignored topic. No, actually it's not. Everywhere I look, men are complaining. And this whole thing about Trump coming into office back in 2016, I mean, most of the headlines back then were angry young and old white men are fighting back. So this has been a thing around the world, that the world is becoming a little bit more conservative and angry. And it's being run by men who just refuse to take responsibility for their actions, and they're just angry bunch of guys. So that's not correct either. Let's see what else we have here. You're totally correct. Some unstable women throw around the term toxic masculinity. They throw it around casually to place blame on someone for their own failures. Right. And that is the whole base of this man's movement, if you want to call it that. But next sentence, masculine men are desired and appreciated by normal, mature, healthy women. That statement is true. Yes, a lot of time. Yeah, obviously, right? Like we're talking about heterosexuals here. Masculine men are desired and appreciated by mature, healthy women. But your average Trump supporter who is completely insecure and is worried about everything and is putting people down and makes fun of people and thinks that it's better to be uneducated than not to be educated. Again, the term toxic masculinity, in that sense, it could be true, right? Because if you lead with anger and violence and you don't have empathy and compassion for people, that is toxic. And so a woman who is complaining about that has a right to complain about that. One of the reasons why young men are not doing well with women these days is because women desire men who are emotionally stable, who can have a relationship, who do know how to connect on an emotional level. And if you don't know how to do that, then you're not going to do well with women. That's just the way it is. And in that sense, if you cannot communicate with others, if you don't know what your own emotions and feelings are, and you don't know how to deal with them in a productive way, you could say that that's toxic. So if that's true for you, then you have to wear it. And you can do better if you want. So there's a whole bunch of comments here. Let me talk about something else here that really caught my attention. And I always knew this was out there, but it's really becoming a major problem here with a lot of men. So let me look this up real quick. So here's some men talking about their relationships. And I find this really interesting that not only it's really sad in one way. I can't believe that people would put this out there because they don't seem to know that it's wrong. But let's take it from the top. So this one man says, I'm breaking up after 7 years together, and me and my, I can't tell if it's his girlfriend or wife, they've been together since they were basically teenagers, it says. Okay. He says, she was my first, but I was not hers. Before I end up taking my own life, this is the best thing for me because it's eating me up every day I wake up. She was in about a 1-year relationship with an abuser in his 20s when she was only 16. I'm getting the most vivid movies in my head of what happened. I am so in love with this girl, and she means more to me than anyone could imagine. I don't know what else to say. I have had enough. I thought I would marry this girl, but what do I do now? I'm in my late 20s and very, very lost. Okay, so you're in a relationship with a woman for 7 years, and you're contemplating suicide because she had a relationship with somebody before you where she was abused. So you don't care about her abuse. You don't care about her trauma. You don't care about how she had to deal with someone who treated her poorly. You're not worried about that. You're worried about that she had a relationship with somebody else before you. That's the number one thing you're worried about here. And you're thinking about committing suicide over it? Where do we start on this one? And this is, again, one of the biggest pushes for conservatism right now in this world, that these men are valuing virginity to this incredible degree. And, let's be honest, it's also coinciding with the fact that people are getting less and less religious. So it's not a religion thing. What it is the incredible insecurity of men. So they value, or at least they say they value, the virginity of a woman because it's pure. But that's not the real reason. It's because you don't want to be compared to another man. Now, in this case, you're being compared to a man who was an abusive jerk, and you're still thinking that that is too much to deal with because you're not caring about her emotions and feelings. You're caring about yours, and you have vivid memories. You're having PTSD over her having a relationship with somebody else when she didn't know you. All right, I'm not going to be doing the diagnosing here today, but let's just say that unfortunately this like alpha male type of thing with these hundreds, if not thousands, of YouTube channels pushing this and condensing all these men together to make them think that they're strong when they're weak is one of the downfalls of our society. And now we elected a really good president for you. Let's move to another person who has a comment here, which I find very interesting. Keep in mind, too, that these people have a lot of trouble putting sentences together, which I find really interesting because they're almost 30 years old. Like, how can you not put a sentence together? But okay, so here's the title of this one. How do you reframe? Now, keep in mind the term reframe is a psychology word. So again, everybody's a therapist now. And although I am an actual therapist and I've gone to school for like over 10 years to be one, I'm not an influencer compared to a lot of young people that have no education whatsoever and they could have millions of subscribers. It's the same thing when I've interviewed people on my radio show and stuff like this from a very in-depth point of view and really can bring out some interesting things with people. There's people who interview people on Facebook and YouTube and all these channels all over the place with millions and upon millions of subscribers that have no background whatsoever, but they can influence people. And so there we are. Let me continue with this. How do you reframe the thought that my wife's ex had longer? Now, it doesn't had longer what? Like that doesn't say anything, but we can take a guess, right? Because as we read more, we'll see. Said now he went from saying wife's ex to now he's saying girlfriend, but again, he's a little bit mixed up. It says my girlfriend hadn't really told me, or I don't really have an idea on who's the longest she's ever had. But my mind is tricking me that her ex might have a longer penis than me, there we go, which translates to the fact that in terms of territory, my ex's penis might have gone to places deeper inside her vagina than mine has not ever reached before. What is this, like Star Trek? We're going to galaxies that have never been seen before. Like, this guy is actually in his mind tracking in his mind about figuring out the depth of another man's penis into his girlfriend's vagina where he has not touched before. Therefore, there's a certain lack of intimacy he has and he can't deal with it. And the first sentence, my girlfriend hadn't really told me. I didn't know that it was a girl's responsibility to tell you and to measure the size of every guy's penis that she's ever been with and just to make sure you know what that is. Like, what are we talking about here? Like, this sounds like a 5-year-old, to be honest with you. The next sentence. Is there any scientific or any other perspective that might challenge this thinking? I would appreciate it. I don't even know what that means. Is there anything scientific that says a guy with a bigger penis does not go further inside a woman than you when you're smaller? I don't know. Like, what do? You go to ask out a girl and you go, oh, by the way, I need a list of every man you've ever been with, and I need to know if you've measured them or not to see if I can have sex with you because I want to go in there further. If you want to talk about length of something, talk about the length of time that you can have sex or intercourse without having an orgasm, man. Like, that's a lot more correlated to a woman's good time, but you don't know that. And if anything, got to have a talk about oral sex. Like, I don't understand this. Do any of you have fathers? Maybe not. Okay. So let's go to the next thought here. Here's another one. Starts off just like this. I had to learn to live with it. I call it the ghost of bedrooms past. It is a demon in my life that won't go away. It changed my marriage. I firmly believe that it is the price we pay for uncommitted recreational sex. And by the way, I was alluding to this before. Why are guys now putting virginity up there as this gold standard? And yeah, part of it is because they don't want to be compared to other men. But let's also say it's because when you can't get a girl, you now are going to say that virginity is a good thing or is something that you're aspiring to. When you're actually aspiring to be with women, but women don't like you because you're creepy. And so now you're going to say virginity is a good thing. It's like the fox who wants the grapes and he keeps trying to reach up to get the grapes and he can't get the grapes. So at some point he says, well, those grapes are probably sour. I never wanted them in the first place. And this is why we see so many young men hating women these days. All right, interesting sentence there. Let me repeat it. I firmly believe that it is the price we pay for uncommitted recreational sex. Okay, many disagree with me. Okay, so now he's talking about this with a lot of people. Interesting. But it has been a dominating force in my life for 38 years. My wife loves me. She has given me everything a woman can give to a marriage. But most of the time, I don't even want to look at her because she slept with somebody before we were married. And it's still there in my mind, hurting me every day. It's hard to imagine that this is even real. That, again, because this guy is obviously older. I mean, he's been worrying about his wife who was with another man before they were married, before they knew each other. And this has been on his mind for 38 years. Listen, guys are getting weaker by the day. I mean, maybe we should just erase all social media, and have guys stop watching this. Listen, just go out and live a life. I don't think any guy in the 60s, 70s, or 80s, maybe, were complaining that people had uncommitted recreational sex. And by the way, how do you know it's uncommitted? Just because you didn't get married at some point doesn't mean you weren't committed. Ridiculous. Let's see if there's anything else here that's interesting before the show gets too long. Oh, here's an interesting one. My wife, 33 years old, and myself, 38-year-old male. We've been together for 8 years, married for 4. We have a 2-year-old and one on the way. The last few years have been taxing on in the intimacy department. We're both very busy in our careers, and we both had, let's say, our first child. Intimacy went from 3 to 4 times a week in the first 4 years being together, now to maybe just 2 in a month. Well, this sounds normal when you have kids. Things kind of, you're busy, you get tired, you got kids now, all right? Okay. So I brought this to her attention several times to try to communicate, but she really wasn't adding anything to the conversation and not looking to work on it at all either. I wouldn't get mad or angry because I know she is up to her eyeballs in nursing and taking care of the toddler, blah, blah, blah. Our toddler has sleeping problems and ends up on our bed most of the nights. Like I said, this is pretty normal stuff. All right, I want to mention that my wife and I have had an incredibly strong relationship outside of the intimacy issue. There is no trust issues or other problems in our marriage. We get along well, and let's get to this next part. Okay, so they have a pretty good marriage. They've got kids. They've been together for a while. Now, this is, again, where it starts to get into this thing of where I don't understand where men are going these days. It says, I never cared about any of my ex's pasts. Again, that's his English, not mine. I am not the jealous type. So I searched and found out about her ex-boyfriend from before we met. Okay, so you're not the jealous type, but you searched and you found out about her ex-boyfriend. Okay, this is going in a bad direction. Now that I found him, I know what he looks like. And I found out that he was taller, and it started to make me feel a little insecure. So I kept on going and started to dive deeper into her past. At this point, I've started asking her questions. She pushes back and says it's none of my business. Yeah, well, she should be doing that. And I need to leave her alone about it. Yeah, that's true. That starts to make me feel even more insecure. I'm thinking she's hiding something. Man, you got kids, you're in an 8-year marriage. What is she hiding? Okay. After a few weeks of arguing, Okay. After a few weeks of arguing and my constant needling at some information, she finally decided to communicate this with me. She said she had a traumatic upbringing with a lot of serious issues. I never knew this. She never shared any of it with me. I knew she had issues with her mother, but never to the extent that she explained it to me the other night. She met me after a long time of therapy and counseling to help her get over her past. So when I met her, she was very confident and had a very clear outlook on relationships, blah, blah, blah. Okay, what are we getting at here? Let me fast forward through some of this. She told me that she had several one-night stands in college that stemmed from heavy drinking to mask her pain. She would deeply regret it in the morning, but a few months later would do it again. By the way, why you're forcing your wife to talk about this after almost a decade of being married and having kids, and now you're saying she should have told you about this and you keep needling her, you're pretty well abusive, man. Like, honestly. All right. It became a vicious cycle that she was using to cope with the pain of her upbringing. Ultimately, why she ended up in therapy. She tells me that she has slept with somewhere between 15 to 18 men when she was between the ages of 18 to 25. Several of those were one-night stands, and the rest were people she had a genuine relationship with. Okay, so you're talking about sleeping with 15 different people over a period of 7 years. So that's like one person every 6 months. Okay, are we complaining about that now? And again, the only reason why she probably told you that is because you were being incredibly abusive and you had to nail that down to force her to tell her how many people she's been with, right? Like, why does that make a difference? She probably didn't want to tell you because of your reaction. So let's see what your reaction is going to be. He says, I feel shocked and stunned with this new information. I would have only guessed 5. The way she presented herself since I met her is the exact opposite of the kind of behavior that she used to show. I don't want to make her feel worse. It's too late, man. But I'm sick to my stomach over this. She went on to say that another thing that she had with the intention of making me feel good, but it made me feel worse. She said that I'm her number 1 in every single category. That when she met me, that every guy that she was ever with just turned into dust. But then she said that she's had a guy who was taller than me, a guy who was more muscular than me, and a guy that had a bigger package than me, and that I'm better than all them, and she's glad that we have a life together and with kids. But it still bothers him. Yeah, I don't know where to start. I'm not going to do therapy on this guy. But you got to be kidding me with this insecurity. Like, we live in a thing now where it's okay for men to get together to browbeat women to death about what they did before they were in a relationship with you. In this guy's case, he's with a woman for almost 10 years and has kids, and now decides to destroy this woman and say, I don't want to make you feel bad, but then does. And the fact that she said that she went through a very turbulent time that was abusive and she needed to go through therapy, you don't care about that. You care about the fact that she slept with somebody. Here's the thing. This particular guy who wrote that, he needs therapy and he needs to go now. And listening to these YouTube channels like Alpha Male and listening to Donald Trump and Elon Musk talk about the way they do with men, talk about how their feelings on how they deal with women, it is no way to go through life. It's like these guys have to start over again from scratch. Anyway, the show's like 31 minutes long here. I just find this stuff really interesting, and I find that every time I try to do something to help men, they run away and they run into the open arms of people like Donald Trump, who are the exact opposite of being masculine. And they are just horrible human beings. And then they run into these other people who do these YouTube channels that in no way, shape, or form are they helping men. The only thing that they're doing is they're giving them a place to complain more. And then they act like, okay, you're under 6 feet tall, so now you have a reason to complain. It makes you feel good for about 2 minutes. Anyway, hopefully some of this has been valuable to you in some way. My name is Joe Peroni. This is the Rise Above Project. Please subscribe and tell a friend. Thank you.